Tonight, the world watched as former President Donald Trump unveiled his so-called Deal of the Century, Part 2, at Mar-a-Lago. Hopes and tensions ran high, the world waited for details. Trump promised a new dawn for the Middle East, claiming only he could deliver peace. The announcement was classic Trump grand statements, bold promises, and a vision of enemies becoming partners. He insisted his plan was tough but fair, the only realistic path forward. Supporters cheered, believing history was about to change. Critics, however, were skeptical, recalling past failures. The plan's secrecy built anticipation but also suspicion. Trump staked his reputation on the idea that economic prosperity would pave the way for peace. He argued that jobs and money could overcome old hatreds. But as details emerged, the plan's flaws became clear. The promises seemed disconnected from reality. For many, it felt more like an ultimatum than a negotiation. The plan appeared to heavily favor one side, ignoring key demands of the other. The room's hopeful energy faded into doubt. Journalists questioned whether this was genuine diplomacy or a political stunt. The world would soon have its answer. The new dawn Trump promised was already threatened by old, unresolved darkness. The stakes were enormous, but so were the risks. Would this plan break the cycle of violence or deepen it? The world braced for the fallout. Trump's gamble was about to be tested. The region's future hung in the balance. The world listened, but skepticism grew. The promise of peace was quickly overshadowed by the reality of division. The stage was set for what would come next. What was in Trump's plan? At its core, it demanded full recognition of Israel by all Arab nations, non-negotiable. It offered a Palestinian state but stripped of real power, no army, no control over borders or airspace, with Israel maintaining security. The economic peace, Prosperity for Peace, promised $50 billion in investments, mostly from Gulf states and international donors. Trump argued jobs and money would buy stability where diplomacy failed. Jerusalem was declared the undivided capital of Israel, with Palestinians offered a capital in a distant suburb, far from the holy sites. Israel would annex all West Bank settlements, making them permanent. The plan denied Palestinian refugees the right of return to Israel, offering resettlement elsewhere. For Palestinians, these terms felt like erasure, not compromise. The plan asked them to surrender core demands for a limited state and economic incentives. Many saw it as a deal they could never accept. International consensus was ignored. The plan's vision was clear: peace on Trump's terms or no peace at all. Critics called it a recipe for more conflict, not resolution. The plan's boldness was matched only by its controversy. It was a high-stakes bet on economic leverage over political reality. The world watched, waiting for the response. The plan's fate would be decided not in Washington, but on the streets of the Middle East. The seeds of unrest were already sown. The plan's collapse was immediate and total. Palestinian leaders excluded from the process rejected it outright. President Abbas called it the slap of the century, voiding all agreements with Israel and the U.S. on the streets. Anger and betrayal boiled over. The plan felt like a surrender document, not a peace offer. Money was seen as a bribe, not a solution. The language of realism sounded like the language of conquest. International experts condemned the plan as one-sided, ignoring decades of law and UN resolutions. They warned it would fuel more conflict, not peace. True peace, they argued, requires negotiation and mutual respect, not imposition. The Trump plan failed this basic test. Within hours, the dream of peace was dead. No talks, no discussions, just rejection. The plan assumed Palestinians would accept for economic reasons, a fatal miscalculation. The conflict is about land, identity, and justice, not just economics. By ignoring these, the plan was doomed. It was a house built on sand, washed away by reality. The speed of the collapse stunned even the skeptics. The region braced for the consequences. The promise of peace had become a catalyst for renewed conflict. The world watched as hope gave way to anger. Anger quickly spilled into violence. Clashes erupted in Jerusalem as protesters faced Israeli security forces. Tear gas, stun grenades, and stone throwing marked the city's streets. The violence spread across the West Bank, Ramallah, Hebron, Nablus, where thousands protested, burned tires, and blocked roads. Israeli soldiers responded with force, injuries mounted. In Gaza, Hamas called for a new intifada, launching rockets into Israel. Air raid sirens blared, families rushed to shelters. Israel retaliated with airstrikes, targeting militants but hitting civilians. The fragile ceasefire shattered. The conflict escalated rapidly, each act of violence fueling the next. A car ramming at a checkpoint, a retaliatory airstrike, each event deepened the crisis. The deal of the century, meant to end conflict, had triggered its most violent chapter in years. The region teetered on the edge of full-scale war. The hope for peace was replaced by chaos. The cycle of violence spun out of control. The world's attention shifted from diplomacy to disaster. The cost of failed plans was measured in blood and fear. The Middle East was once again engulfed in flames. The promise of peace had become a distant memory. To understand the chaos, listen to the people. Ahmed in Ramallah shouted, "This plan tells us we are nothing." In Israel, Sarah said, "We were promised security. Now all we hear are sirens. My children are terrified." The conflict's toll is felt on both sides. On the ground, hope is replaced by anger and despair. The promise of peace has become a source of new suffering. The voices of anger and despair echo across the land. The plan's failure sent shockwaves worldwide. The European Union condemned the plan, reaffirming support for a two-state solution and warning against annexation. Major Arab powers, caught between alliances and public anger, issued cautious statements, praising peace efforts but supporting Palestinian rights. The Arab world was divided and uncertain. Russia and China called the plan unrealistic, urging a return to international negotiations. They criticized American unilateralism, positioning themselves as responsible actors. The United Nations called for de-escalation and reminded all parties of their obligations under international law. The UN stressed that lasting peace requires direct negotiations, not imposed solutions. The world watched in alarm as violence escalated. The Trump plan had pushed the region closer to the brink. Global leaders scrambled to contain the fallout. The international consensus was clear: peace cannot be imposed. The region's future depended on dialogue, not dictates. The world's alarm grew as the crisis deepened. The consequences of failure were global. In Washington, the plan's collapse sparked a political firestorm. Trump and his allies blamed the Palestinians, calling them ungrateful and unwilling to embrace peace. Supporters claimed the plan was perfect. Violence proved Palestinians were never serious. Democrats called the plan a catastrophic failure, accusing Trump of arrogance and ignorance. They argued the plan was a political gift to the right, not a real peace proposal. Intelligence leaks revealed warnings had been ignored. Experts predicted rejection and violence. The administration was accused of cherry-picking intelligence to fit its narrative. The fallout spilled into the presidential campaign, with candidates promising a return to traditional diplomacy. The debate raged. Was Trump a bold visionary or a reckless amateur? The situation on the ground worsened as politicians argued. The crisis became a symbol of failed leadership. The cost of political gambles was measured in lives lost. The world watched as Washington pointed fingers. The region paid the price for decisions made far away. The political fallout was fierce, but the human cost was greater. Beyond politics, the human cost was staggering. In Gaza, Omar sat on the rubble of his destroyed home, clutching a teddy bear. In Ashkelon, Rivka lay on her hallway floor during rocket sirens, feeling like a prisoner in her own home. These stories were repeated thousands of times. Families homeless, children traumatized, lives cut short. The cost of conflict was written in tears and blood. The stories from the rubble were a call for empathy and action. The world's conscience was tested. The world had to listen. Where do we go from here? The region stands on the brink of full-scale war. Violence has only intensified since the plan's announcement. The Israeli military mobilizes. Hamas threatens prolonged conflict. Clashes continue daily. The cycle of retaliation is unbroken. Diplomatic efforts struggle as trust collapses. The US has lost credibility as a mediator. European and Arab nations try to broker a ceasefire, but the space for compromise is gone. Both sides are locked into confrontation. The immediate goal is simply to stop the bleeding. The best-case scenario, a new ceasefire and negotiations, seems unlikely. More likely is a drawn-out, bloody conflict or even a regional war. The future is unwritten, shaped by those on the ground. The deal of the century is now a cautionary tale. Peace cannot be imposed. It must be built through dialogue and empathy. Tonight the world holds its breath, hoping reason can rise above the drums of war. The region's fate hangs in the balance.